Okay, I would like to, I believe we got Administrator Yorkie with us. I see a space there. Yes, okay, nope, now I see it, thank you. Okay, I'd like to call this Committee of the Whole work session to order. It is 10 o'clock on October 20th, 2020. And this is a public meeting. So I will read the statute statements that are required to conduct a meeting by virtual means or by telephone. We have one commissioner that's doing it by telephone because of the circumstances for internet there. Number one, it has been determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the related peacetime emergency declaration made by Governor Walz in accordance with Minnesota statutes, Chapter 12. Secondly, we have ensured that all members of the body participating in the meeting, wherever their physical location, can hear one another and can hear all discussion and testimony offered at today's meeting. Number three, we have also ensured that members of the public present at the regular meeting location of the body can hear all discussion and testimony and all votes of the members of the body. We have urged the public not to attend this meeting in person because of the COVID-19 pandemic and have ensured that members of the public can view and monitor the meeting remotely in real time by broadcasting the meeting on Cook County website. Number four, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have determined that it may be unfeasible for County Auditor Brady Powers, County Attorney Molly Hicken, County Administrator James Yorkie, and members of the Board of Commissioners to be physically present at the County Boardroom at the Cook County Courthouse. 5 all votes will be conducted by roll call, so each member's vote on each issue will be identified and recorded. Just in regard to that statement, we are not making decisions today. Committee of the Whole is a work session. We will discuss our thoughts and views on certain items as it pertains to the agenda today. And our agenda today is the bylaws drafting. Special thanks to Attorney Hicken for all the work that's been done on this. This is our 6th. I think we've had 6 drafts on this now over the period of a year. So before we start with our process today in discussion, I would like to just turn it over to Administrator Yorkie for any comments that you may have for us before we start a meeting today.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Bersheim. And just want to start by recognizing the tremendous amount of work that's already gone into getting us this far. I know that many of the people on this meeting have participated in that, and I want to especially recognize Molly Hicken's efforts for getting this document together. So from my perspective as the new administrator, I think there are a couple of things that I want to call to attention. The first is the concept of a common operating picture. So in emergency preparedness, there's this idea of a common operating picture, which is that all people who are involved in the response to the emergency have the same information and have a way of understanding the problem and responding in unison. And I think that concept is very relevant to this document. What it does is it provides us all with a common operating picture of how county government operates, how the board operates, how it's organized, what the terms are, processes or procedures and meetings. All of these build a common understanding of how the machinery of county government works. And I think that's really important for all of us to provide effective service to the public. The other thing that I want to talk about is transparency in government. And I think these bylaws are important because they do explicitly lay out all the processes that we go through to make sure that we have a board that's seated, that we have clear terms of office, that we have clear descriptions of the different kinds of meetings that the Board of County Commissioners can have. Very importantly, describing public hearings and the opportunity that members of the public have to engage with the board, recording and broadcasting the meetings. all of these are super important to ensure that we can effectively govern the county, and that we can engage citizens in the work of government. And so I just want to say, as a new administrator, I'm really eager to get this document approved, because we know that we're going to have at least one new commissioner coming on in January. And we know also that the first district seat is up for election in February, so we'll have another new commissioner then. And I think it's going to be really helpful for us as we bring those new folks on board to have this document available to share with them and to go through, so that they can understand what all the processes are as they begin their journey as new commissioners. And so I'm just really glad that you all have put in the work into this that you have. I think it's a really solid document. I know there are probably some parts of the text that you'll want to discuss, but I think on the whole, it's a really solid document. And I think it's something that's needed for us to be able to move forward. So that's my piece on the bylaws. Again, I'm really grateful for the work that you have all done on it.
Thank you, Administrator Yorkie. And just to give a little information about how we're going to proceed with this process, we have scheduled this to be an agenda item on October 27th at our board meeting. And the purpose of today is to get input from all the commissioners, some of our thoughts individually, collectively, on the possible, adoption of this as a working document. It has some sections to it that are not just pertaining to bylaws. I think as we look at what's been prepared so well by our Attorney Hicken today, is that we could address and go forward in this meeting in 5 phases. The first phase would be the summary. You received a document, a report, where we take a look at some of the additions or changes that we made since we last met, to affirm those or express our concerns about them. And I'd like to mention, and I'll mention this again, that if a commissioner has some very serious concerns about these, please express them. And as far as I see, the format for October 27th is that depending upon our discussion today, if we have some consensus, it seems, on things, I think we could ask the attorney to redraft some things or add some things, but not to make a decision on those today. Also, a commissioner, I think, as far as due diligence to the decision-making process, could make an amendment at this board meeting coming up on October 27th for something that they would want us to address. And then we would take those amendments first, and then hopefully get into where we could adopt certain parts of our work so far. For example, the bylaws could be a section. We could take a look at some of these other areas as well. I mentioned 5 phases of 5 areas today, and they were put forth in the report from Attorney Hicken. Here again, the summary. And we could look at number 5C, about a section on best practices for phone and video. We talk a little bit about the code of ethics. And then we have a section on citizens. And then we have a section regarding staff. And so I think we'll take each of those as a discussion piece today. So, and definitely Attorney Hicken, again, thank you so much for all your work. You've been looking at best practices. You've done a great job in summarizing, I think, some of our thinking and some of our discussions as best we could from our group, and hopefully have achieved some sense of consensus as we are right now. So I would go to the first part, which will be to take a look at the summary from our last meeting. And there was some adds there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 changes that we came up with pertaining to that. And I think hopefully all of you have looked at those. So for a point of discussion going forward right now, I could do 1 of 2 things. We could do a roll call on your thoughts on that part. Or if let's just try it initially, that if you would raise your hand or indicate your name. Thank you, Attorney Hicken, for adding those to the screen. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Attorney Hicken for any comments you have, and then we'll go back to the discussion about how to proceed. So Attorney Hicken, would you like to make some preliminary comments before we take this on?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Commissioners and Mr. Yorkie. I don't think I have any other preliminary comments. I just want to express my gratitude to the board for their patient and diligent effort on making sure that we have a good, solid, and high quality document here. I hope that you can see the screen.
Yes.
For my PowerPoint. So the title should say changes made after last meeting. In the board packet, I provided you draft number 6 of the rules of operating procedure. Did anyone have any concern that the changes that I made as a result of our last meeting are not indicative of the consensus of the board?
Okay. Would any go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I don't have concerns. I guess I do. I guess it is a concern. There's one of the changes with the hires and retirements. To me, seems a little confusing, and I think having 2 consent agendas is confusing. My understanding is the intention was to somehow recognize people who have worked for the county and are retiring, and also to recognize and welcome new employees. And both of those things I think are very important. I think there's also some trickiness when it comes to say, well, there can be trickiness in certain resignation situations, or also firing situations. And you know, if we have hires and retires on a consent agenda, it kind of pulls them out of the regular consent agenda, but it's still just a bulk group if there's multiple consent, and so it feels very Minnesotan to me to kind of address it, but not. And I'm wondering if it might make more sense to leave that section on the normal consent agenda and find another way that's maybe a little more direct to recognize employees who are resigning or new hires, and just wanted to throw that out there and see what other commissioners thought. Over.
Okay, Commissioner Storley, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I did bring that to our attention because I felt that we were zipping along and not really recognizing new people. I don't know necessarily about retirements. I agree with Dave on that it could still be part of the consent agenda. And since we're now to the point where on a consent agenda, we can say, I would just like to discuss, rather than pull it and then go through all of the maneuvers of that, but just recognize Susie Q was hired, welcome aboard, end of recognition. Yeah, retirements or the implications of some of that perhaps should not be recognized. So how about we just talk about leaving it on the consent agenda, and then just if we want to pull it, if it's someone that we feel is in our best interest to recognize, we can do that. Otherwise, we could let it go.
Okay, Commissioner Dukirk, do you have your hand up? I think you do.
I do. I have a wild and crazy idea. Why don't we just move hires and retires under administrator? And then it's not up to each of us to decide the weight of who it is. I think part of Ginny, correct me if I'm wrong, I think part of it was the randomness of it when it was in the consent agenda. Sometimes we would remember to pull one, sometimes we would remember to recognize one. Which ones do we pull? Like Dave said, if it's a termination, then we don't pull it, and then it's not consistent. And maybe if we just take hires and retirements and make it as an item under the administrator, then it gets covered and it gets approved.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dukirk. Anyone else want to comment on that? Now we have, leaving it in the consent agenda, we have a possibility of putting it under administrative updates or reports. Commissioner Mills, and I would also call on our administrator, I think, at this, as well for your thoughts, Administrator Yorkie, after Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, so I would certainly be amenable to,
Oh, you are muted.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. So I would be happy to include it in my report. It does need to be an action item, however. And so my report is usually informational. So I'm not sure that would meet the requirements of having an action item unless somehow, I'm just not sure how that would work. I'm certainly happy to report on personnel information. I think that would be a great way to recognize people who are coming on board and leaving the organization or being promoted. But in terms of the board's taking action on it, I'm not sure that would necessarily work unless I'm missing something.
Okay.
James, you can have
Commissioner-
action items under you.
Is that right? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And forgive my ignorance about that, but in Johnson County, Kansas, these kinds of items did not actually go on the board agenda, so I'm less familiar with how that works.
Okay, Commissioner Mills, we'll go back to you for your comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was going to ask for Administrator Yorkie's input there too, and I'm open to that. Having it under administrative and yes, clearly the board needs to take action on it. And I guess one of the ideas I was wondering about is if we just leave it all on the regular consent agenda and then have a section much like Commissioner Dukirk has taken on with the anniversaries at the end of a meeting, just having a welcome to new hires. And list their names there, and if that would be, because largely our county board meetings, our regular meetings are to take care of business, and I still, I'm trying to find that balance of taking care of business and maintaining and encouraging the human aspect of our organizations. Just trying to walk that line. But I all these ideas sound good to me. Over.
Okay, so I have a question to Commissioner Mills, because you raised the issue of whether it should be as presented. You said it was tricky. I guess I'm seeking a little better understanding of what is the problem with it as presented now, as having it a different consent agenda item. I'm not understanding, I guess what you mean by tricky. Where are the problems with it? And I'm not defending this at all. I'm just seeking some clarification.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for asking. And the trickiness isn't on having it as another consent agenda item. The trickiness I find is maybe more on potentially on resignations or terminations, and just differentiating. I find it funny to have two consent agendas, because when you have hires and retires on a consent agenda, that's still not pulling them. That's still just bulk voting And so I don't feel like that's truly doing justice to recognizing people. I think it just makes our process more tedious without accomplishing the intention of recognizing employees. But yeah, the trickiness I found could be more with termination or resignations. I know those can be sensitive areas and have potential legal consequences, and so I'm not as familiar navigating those waters, and I just sense a trickiness there. Does that all make sense? Over.
Okay, just so Attorney Hicken has sort of got something up for us to put this in order of business. My understanding is then if what you're saying, Commissioner Mills, is that we would leave it as a under consent agenda. And if some commissioner wanted to make a comment, then they would need to pull it. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, I think what I would rather suggest is to have some kind of new hire recognition, much like we have the anniversary recognition. Over.
Okay, so I'm seeking understanding on where do we make the decision? It would be back under regular public of the consent agenda. And there would be always an item on hires and so forth. Then I'll turn it over to Commissioner DeKirk, but if you could just answer that, please.
Yeah. My thought was to have it like to have one consent agenda and have hires and retires there, and then have the recognition, and that's taking care of business, and then having recognition at the end of the meeting, much like the anniversary is over.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner DeKirk?
Molly's covered it in her changes. So consent agenda remains the same. Remove 6, hires and retires. And then change recognition of staff anniversaries to just a standing item that says recognition of staff. And then once a month anniversaries would go under there, but it would also include what Dave was talking about.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner DeKirk. Okay, so I don't have any problems with that. And Attorney Hicken, did you want to make a comment? And then I'll just ask for people's general thoughts on this.
Sure, I'm just making sure that this is fitting what the majority of commissioners are looking for. So we would get rid of hires and retirements, that paragraph and part of the list here. I had omitted recognition of staff anniversaries in this draft. I don't remember how that happened, but I'm glad that we talked about it. I added it back in, and then I added another clause, recognition of staff, comma, anniversaries and hires, retirements.
Okay. So any commissioners, I'm just going to ask, do you have any problems with the changes that have been recommended? Dropping the hires and part from a separate consent agenda and having it back in the consent agenda, and then having item 10 added to our order of agendas. Any concerns about that? And I would say we could go ahead with that and include that in the presentation that we'll have for October 27th. Any other comments or questions on that one? Okay, thank you. So let's go to any of the other issues under the summary. If we could go back to that page, Attorney Hicken.
I think only half of my PowerPoint
Okay.
is showing here, right?
Right. Double click. There we go. Okay. Any other of these items that we previously worked on that you would like to further discuss?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. and I first want to apologize to Attorney Hicken for not getting anything to her in writing, and hope I just have some questions and then possibly some changes. And thank you for your work on this. It's greatly appreciated, and you know we've had a very, very difficult time without you. But there was at our last committee of the whole, there was some disagreements and concerns about some of the language, and I guess if it's all right, where I'd like to start is this is on page 12 of the bylaws, and it's section 5, rules of procedure. I'm not sure what page that is in the packet here. Looks like 18. Yeah. Are we all there?
Yes.
Okay.
Section 5, rules of procedure.
Yep.
You see that my Word document?
I'm sorry?
You see my Word document? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Mills.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can't see it, I'm afraid. So I'll be navigating blind, but with audio here. So I Commissioner Dukirk and I had discussion about some of her concerns, and frankly, I have questions. Just I'm not clear. I read things differently than she did, and don't have good answers to justify why I read them the way I did. So I just thought I would take an opportunity here in our discussion to see if we could all get on the same page there. And Attorney Hicken, hopefully you can help clarify some of the items. So the first one is 5A, which is principles of the rules of procedure, and then number 7. A motion once decided may not be brought up again at the same meeting. And so that I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. If you vote on something and it fails, you can't just bring it up again and vote again at the same meeting. That makes sense to me. One of the questions that Commissioner Dukirk brought up that I don't have a lot of experience with, and I think the board in general doesn't experience often, but it does come up, is rescinding. If a motion is made and then passed, is it the case that, according to this language, that the board could not rescind that in the same meeting?
Hicken, I think that would be a legal issue, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So it's been so long since I addressed that in the context of an actual active issue.
Right.
I don't have the legal references at the top of mind here, but my initial impression would be that would be a separate motion. So your motion, once passed, that you now desire to reverse or take away, the way that you modify that is by a new motion. That's a motion to rescind or a motion to reverse. I can't remember what it's called, but it would actually be a new motion. You're not opening the old motion for reconsideration of the action item originally addressed. What you're doing is you're trying to reverse that prior motion.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't know, Commissioner Dukirk, does that make sense to you as well, or do you see problems with the language there?
I do. As an incredibly literal person, a motion once decided. So rescinding that motion means you're talking about that motion again. You're not changing that motion, but you are discussing it again.
Not be brought up again. So I would interpret that phrase to mean brought before the board again, you know, as a formal item of consideration.
Well, and we don't need to answer this now, but it was something I thought we should talk about and look at, and so I'm certain we can get clarity through various resources, and I think it may be worth checking into just, you know, what's normal for that, and then maybe we can revisit it in the future, if that's okay, Attorney Hicken?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just making note.
And where
Mr.
I
Chair,
think Dave, where I think we were on this was it would not be discussed again because we as a board have made decisions where it's been 2-3 and people have continued to beat the dead horse. So Molly, I know there isn't a legal term for that, but
Yeah, that's what
maybe-
we're trying to avoid here. Yep.
yeah. So
If
Yeah.
I could just, Attorney Hicken, if you could just maybe wordsmith this a little bit better for our October 27th meeting. Maybe some language like a motion once decided may not be brought up for action again at the same meeting. Would that get
Myron, that says the same thing. Maybe a motion once decided may not be debated further during the meeting or something like that. And I know, Dave, you don't like the word debated.
Okay, thank you.
May not be
I'm
brought
comfortable.
up again
Yeah.
for debate.
I think as
Yeah.
long as it's legally, if you could have something that would meet the legal requirements and address the concerns.
I will work on that, certainly.
Okay. Very good.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Mills?
There was two more numbers in this section, if I could ask about those.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. The other, the question I had is number 9. Could we talk about an example of a member's fundamental rights being reduced or taken away? What does that
So,
mean?
sure. I think an example of this, thankfully, it's not something that we're very familiar with. I don't think we've done this before, but if the board were to make a motion to censure a commissioner who's a member of the board, so take away their right to vote at the rest of the meeting or the right to bring motions, that would certainly be a fundamental right. So it would require a 2/3 vote. What's interesting about this standard principle of the rules of procedure as it applies to our Board of Commissioners is that our board is a 5-member board and a majority vote is 3. A 2/3 vote is also 3, I think.
Yes.
So there's no substantive difference between a 2/3 vote and a majority vote, which is what it takes to make any action go forward.
So censure, yeah, I guess I'm not very familiar with that, and what my impression or very limited understanding was more or less just a slap on the wrist saying, there, don't be like that. But it's more serious. It's taking away the ability to vote or make a motion. Is that right?
I think it could be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a big deal. And I can see
That'd be the
situations.
right to vote.
I'm sorry?
Or to vote or to bring a motion or to participate in the discussion at a meeting. Those would all be fundamental rights of a board member.
I would just to ask the question, and then Administrator Yorkie, I'll call on you. I believe that isn't there something in statute about this, Attorney Hicken? That when you censor someone, I thought there was.
It's not something that I've specifically researched. You could be right.
I think I did look it up at one time, and my memory is not the best, I know, but I believe that that would be something we need to consider. If this is a statutory, issue, then we should have it. But if it's not in here, then we still have the right to do it anyway. So, but I'm not saying that we should do this at all or advocate for it. I hope it never happens, but it could in the future. Administrator Yorkie, would you like to comment? I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things. So since we have a 5-member board, I found it a little confusing to have the fraction represented with numerals. I would recommend spelling that out so that it says 2-thirds. The other thing is that 2/3 is technically 66.67%. And so if we have 3 members voting in favor, that's only 60%.
Yep,
So-
I think you're right. I did the math after. Sorry to interrupt.
So really that would require at least 4 members vote affirmatively.
That was my understanding of it too. Yeah.
That's very helpful and much less scary. And I can imagine situations where, I mean, it's a big deal. But I can imagine situations where that could be necessary. But it was just something I thought we should discuss a little bit. But I think it's probably important as a rule of procedure. The other one I thought we should maybe talk about a little bit more is
Commissioner Mills?
Yep.
Before we move on, those of you who can see my screen, do you see how I modified this language to take away the fraction and instead spell out 2-thirds vote? And then
Question, I think that this is going to be interesting, but what if we have 4 active members as we do now? Then
you're right.
then we have an issue. And so I think we got to research this a little bit.
Actually,
well, no, 3 if
If there's
3
4, it would
members.
take 3.
I'm sorry.
it's always
If
a
it was 4 members, then it would take 3 affirmative.
no.
It
You
wouldn't.
always go from you apply that fraction or the majority vote to the full board as if the full board was there. You don't need fewer votes to pass an action if you have 1 commissioner missing or 2.
Quorum is always 3, right?
Right.
Yep. Okay. Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
Okay, and so the last one I was hoping, I mean, there is more to talk about, but in this section, the last one I was hoping to talk about is number 10. Silence shall constitute an affirmative vote. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. Just to be devil's advocate, what if someone can't speak? I think we need to have some kind of indicator for votes. But I guess we need to somehow address a commissioner not indicating anything. Is that kind of the intent of number 10?
Yes, so if a commissioner is refusing to vote out of an objection to the process or some kind of an objection, they don't get to stall out the board's progress. But I think I see what you're saying, Commissioner Mills. the word silence is problematic because people may indicate their vote in other ways other than verbally.
Yes.
Right. And we did that. We did a show of hands, remember?
Yes.
Quite a ways back. Yeah.
Yeah. I
And
still
that-
do it, even on the
I asked for that too. Excuse me. I asked for that, and I think Bershheim has also done that too. Show of hands. So then if there's either nothing verbal or not a hand, then it's very obvious there's silence. And how do you take that as affirmative? That's interesting. Means they would say yes to something, to a motion.
You have to vote no if you are opposed to, you don't want
Right.
a motion to go forward. So I
Right.
doubled the words here. Commissioner Mills, for your benefit, this is what I drafted. Should a commissioner decline to indicate their vote, this shall constitute an affirmative vote.
Thank you. And, I guess we have to decide, or every year in February, we have to decide if it constitutes an affirmative or a negative. It has to do one or the two. And so it's almost a horse apiece, I guess. Or what is, I guess I would like to know a little bit more legal rationale behind this number 10, if that's possible. And it doesn't have to be now, again. But I just, it's a very interesting, strange thing that maybe is uncommon, but still very important.
I can do some more research for you. Again, this language was all adopted from the rules of procedures of other counties, and maybe we took it from a county bylaws that are rare or original. But, my guess is why it's an affirmative vote is, again, so that a commissioner's objection to proceeding, let's say out of protest, they wish not to vote. They've agreed to serve in their position under the bylaws, the rules of procedure. And so their protest to voting should not put a barrier before progress of the rest of the board. I don't know if I'm adequately explaining what's in my head about that, but Mr. Chair, it looks like Commissioner Dukirk has a comment.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see that. Commissioner Dukirk?
So Dave, sometimes we have topics where you may not be completely opposed, you may be uncomfortable with it, and you may just not want to vote because you don't want to, you feel uncomfortable. So I like the language as it's changed, and it forces a commissioner to be honest with themselves and the public. If you are truly opposed to something, then you need to make that known. Molly, does that kind of clear it up, or does that make it muddier?
I think that's well stated, Commissioner Dukirk.
That helps me a lot. Thank you.
And I think too that a commissioner can abstain as well. So, but I think that's well understood. But you can abstain, and that has its purpose as well. Either you've got a conflict of interest, or you don't want to vote.
Molly, can you just not vote because you don't want to? I don't think abstaining is supposed to be used to get out of voting. I think you have to have a legitimate reason to abstain.
I would agree, Commissioner
Oh,
Dukirk.
okay.
Is
I may be
that
wrong in that. I thought that I'd read someplace where you could do that, but if you could double check that, Attorney Hicken, I may be wrong, but I thought that abstaining could mean you didn't want to weigh in on it, but that's maybe where I've been before. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to make an issue of it, that's for sure. Commissioner Dukirk?
Yeah, if there's somewhere where it says you can abstain because you don't want to vote, then we need to address the language. I don't think any commissioner should just be able to abstain because a topic is difficult. I mean, that eliminates having 10 in here. So,
Okay. Good point. Commissioner Starling?
Yes, well, rather than abstain, I think people will say they recuse themselves.
Okay,
So I don't think that would mean that they're abstaining. They just cannot vote because of the situation that they are in. So where does recuse come in here?
I think recuse would be interpreted the same as abstain, that they aren't
Okay.
substantively different actions.
Okay.
that commissioners
Okay.
would- I
Yeah,
don't know of any separate way to not vote other than abstention. What I am happy to do is come back at the next board meeting. I mean, ideally, put this in the board packet so you can see ahead of time what the rules are about abstaining, and I can even propose some language to put into our rules of procedure that clarify those rules about abstaining.
thank you. Okay, anything else for those areas? In summary, I think, thank you for all your
Well,
input
Mr.
on that and good suggestions.
Chair?
Yes. Commissioner
Sorry,
Mills.
sorry. Thank you for the attention, and sorry to drag it out more. I'm just looking that I don't bring up the next section. I guess it might not be reviewed further, and so well, first off, I want to thank everyone for the discussion and suggestions for abstaining. I think that's important to have addressed in our bylaws. But then the next section is on that same page, page 12, which is 18 of the packet there. It's down under section B, meeting engagement and restriction on off-topic discussion. I guess it's down in sections 4 through 6. And this is where I was not seeing eye to eye with Commissioner Dukirk at the last meeting, so I want to thank her for taking the time to walk me through her concerns there. And I guess somehow what I'd like to see, and I think Commissioner Dukirk is on a similar page, but I'll let her speak for herself, is just that I would like to see kind of 4 and 5 being put together somehow. And I'm sorry, Molly, for not having specific suggestions there. But then adding that that combination to the end of number 6, and kind of the reason for that is I think the point is made that our communications, we should be focused in our meetings. We should not be distracted. We should not be having side discussions or outside discussions during our meetings. And certainly things come up, say the heat goes out in your place and it's semi-emergency to get a heating contractor there to fix it, and we're in a meeting and have to be in the meeting, and yada yada, that type of thing. And I think that's covered in with the exception of addressing urgent matters. But what I would like is to make it clear that shouldn't be happening, but also trust commissioners to use their judgment with that. And then also, I think there's two reasons for that, both to give meetings our full attention, but also because of data practice law, having all of that be public data. I think that's just a great thing to state first, and just lay that out there, and then just say the best practice for not having side and outside discussions. Does that summarize your thoughts as well, Commissioner Dukirk? And I'd like to hear other commissioner concerns too regarding that.
Commissioner Dukirk, go ahead.
So what Commissioner Mills and I discussed was removing 4 and 5, leaving 6 as it is, but adding to it to capture 4 and 5. So what 6 would say is any communications exchanged by the public body during a public meeting may be subject to government data practice law and subject to disclosure and retention requirements. Then you would add, thus it is important for commissioners to retain from electronic or other communication during county board meetings.
Okay. Attorney Hicken, could you capture that for us?
I'm gonna request that Commissioner Dukirk repeat that new language once again. Thus, it is important for commissioners to
Refrain from electronic or other forms of communication during county board meetings or just during meetings, either way.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. One aspect that I think might be important to include, but again, I want to give commissioners the benefit of the doubt there, or just, trusting them with their judgment, is just in number 4, when a commissioner is speaking, no other commissioner shall engage in private discussions, whether live or by electronic communications. Again, that we want to be respectful, we want to be listening, we want to be focused, but there are situations where something can come up, and so it just seemed both important to somehow address the idea of focus, but then also we don't need to be policing commissioners during the meeting necessarily, but the goals are just so that we're all on the same page and that we're operating in a respectful manner. But I think I'm comfortable with the language that Commissioner Dukirk has suggested. Over.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Bersheim, excuse me, sorry. In the past, this has been addressed. We have had commissioners who either during the meeting or prior to the meeting let the rest of the board know that they have an issue they need to address, or a private issue or whatever, and they may need to step out during the meeting. I don't think that needs to be in the rules to be discussed. That's just common courtesy. But we have had situations where commissioners have had to attend to something else.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dukirk. Excuse me. So any concerns about this new language as presented? I don't have any. Any other commissioner? Commissioner Starley?
Thank you. So my understanding is you want to combine 4 and 5. And then at the end of the 6th comment, put thus, and then the language go there. So is that my understanding where we are?
Remove 4 and 5 and change 6.
Okay, if you're going to remove it, then give me the language that you want to put in there then on 6. You're going to calculate 4 and 5?
4 and 5 is deleted, and that last sentence in 6 covers it. It also covers it in 1, 2, and 3. I mean, all of the language in here repeatedly says, don't talk out of turn.
Mm-hmm. Right. So did Molly get that to read back?
Yep. Thus, it is important for commissioners to refrain from electronic or other forms of communication during meetings.
Okay, I think it's in yellow there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I also talked to the administrator about this. Some of the issue lies in the staff, and so this will have to be communicated with staff because there are a lot of staff who are not used to administrative government and have become used to reaching out to commissioners during meetings in order to find out what time they're on the agenda or how things are going or when time is up. And so this is just part of how we conduct business going forward. And I think it'll create less stress for some commissioners to not be interrupted during meetings.
I think just in response to that, that could be communicated by our county administrator that if there any kind of contact's going to be made, it would be to the county administrator.
Yep.
In regards to that. I don't think we'd need that here, but that would be hopefully an operational thing with the county administrator.
I'm sorry about that. That's what I was saying. I'm sorry I didn't make that clear.
And we can easily do that. That's not a problem.
Very good. Okay, so I think we can say we'll leave this language in going to October 27th.
Well, and Mr. Chair,
Yes.
there was one more thing, and I don't want to forget about it. For some reason, I didn't write it down, and so shame on me here. But from our previous committee, the whole discussion, my take on some of Commissioner Dukirk's concerns were just kind of about the chair's role and just relationships between the chair and commissioners, and just communication difficulties, so my impression was just around like the power of the chair per se, just controlling the conversation. And my thinking is like, well, you need some kind of organization, you need some way to keep order and conversation respectful and moving along. And so after talking with Commissioner Dukirk, it sounded more like the concern was just about the formality of the procedure, in that some chairs operate meetings differently, and so I thought we could talk about that a little bit. I think it's important to have a common understanding. I think when we talked about this at the last meeting, it's at the chair's discretion how the meeting is run. But if we spell it out, much like it is, it's kind of, if it is at the chair's discretion, then why do we have these rules is kind of my question. And so I don't know, and this is referring to number 2 and number 3. And so I don't know if there's a way, maybe this is the best language, but I don't know if there's a way to spell out that the chair will communicate the meeting engagement, or if we want to have this format as default, or just what everyone's thoughts are there. But I thought it was worth talking about.
Sure. Okay, thank you. So what I'm understanding is you would like to take a look at the language as it's presented to look at the role of the board chair. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm having a hard time expressing myself. What I am saying is that different chairs operate differently. I greatly appreciate having civility and semblance of order, but I think there are ways that are potentially less formal to achieve that. And so from our previous discussion, it sounded like that was at the chair's discretion. And so what I'm asking is if it's at the chair's discretion, then we probably shouldn't have this specific meeting engagement written in the bylaws. We should maybe just say that meeting engagement is at the chair's discretion, and that and we could even give examples, and examples could be number 2 in that format. And frankly, I'm not familiar, because of my short tenure on the board, of other styles, but I just want to point that out. If it is at the chair's discretion, that could be in conflict with the written bylaws that we're trying to follow.
If I could just comment, and then I go to Commissioner DeKirk. I think this is what's usually done in Robert's Rules of Order Revised. And I think we referenced that someplace, but certainly your comments. My concern would be then we would have a different kind of procedure every time we elect a new board chair. So we would conduct our meetings at the discretion of the board chair. Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to seek better understanding here without any kind of, expectations of how the board chair runs a meeting.
Right. There was just, and forgive me, I think there was just a comment made last meeting in response to concerns about these numbers, and the response was that, well, it's at the chair's discretion. It doesn't have to be done that way. And so I don't know that I'm comfortable with that, because the whole point, unless we specifically say that the meeting engagement is at the chair's discretion, because that's why we're writing these bylaws. That's why we're writing these procedures, is to try to really define that. So if we really want the meetings to be run this way, and I think that it's a great way to run meetings, but I think we also need to recognize different ways that different people communicate. So I'm not saying we need to change this, but I just wanted to talk about it, because I didn't fully understand what some concerns were at the last meeting, and I don't know that I'm doing a great job expressing those now, but at least I'd like to talk more about it. So
just for purposes of discussion, so you're raising the issue whether we should change the language as it's presented to have a statement that it'll be at the discretion of the board chair for their role as presiding officer.
something like that.
Okay.
And
Commissioner
which,
Kirk, you had your hand up, but anyone else want to comment? Commissioner Starley?
Did Commissioner Dukirk have something right now?
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Dukirk.
So item 2, which Molly will get to your questions, removing item 2 and changing it to the chair will determine the rules of orders or decide the rule of order. And Myron, to your concerns, every new board chair has changed things a little bit. And then leave item 3.
I still do not know where we are in the document. That's
Molly,
my-
you're on page 12 of the document under B, meeting engagement. So we removed 4 and 5 and changed 6.
Yeah.
So 2, yep, right there. Instead of saying any commissioner desiring to speak, remove that whole sentence and change it to the chair will decide the rules of order or something to that language.
But is this in agreement with the statements above?
Yep. Yep, it just gives the chair a little more flexibility if they want to have open discussion or roundtable discussion or order of speaking. It just gives more flexibility.
The chair may determine.
The chair will determine the rules of order.
Ooh, I don't know.
This
Yeah.
is going to be reviewed and approved every February, so it can be changed. And leaving number 3, leaves it so that you're, addressing the chair and being recognized by the chair and talking to them.
Attorney Hicken?
My concern is I think this might be counterproductive to what you're trying to do. This gives the chair a great deal of power. And
Yep. That's why we make them the chair, because we trust them.
But I also think that commissioners would desire to know the general rules about when they may be heard and the order in which they may be heard and what they can talk about. I think there's great value to having that in black and white. That's the whole purpose of this document.
Isn't that covered in 3?
Isn't 5 covered?
No, isn't 3. A member once recognized, maybe once recognized by the chair.
How do you determine who gets recognized? If the chair doesn't like somebody, they can never recognize them under the amendment here. Or maybe that is already the case.
That is the case.
Yeah.
The chair may designate the order of speaking. That means that if they don't want to hear you, they can have everybody else speak first.
So here's what we're eliminating. We're eliminating this. We would eliminate this sentence. Any commissioner desiring to speak shall address the chair, not proceed until being recognized.
Yep. And we're also removing when 2 or more members address the chair at the same time, the chair shall designate the order of speaking.
All right.
Got a question.
Oh.
If the board chair may determine the rules of order, then any of these other resolutions here don't have any meaning in regards to respectful communication, recognition. That would give them the power to do whatever is under B. And that's all you would have as a statement. And if
I'm
that's
good with
what you
that.
want, yeah, and the question is, do the rest of us want that?
The resolution does cover it.
Any other comments on that? Commissioner Story?
Thank you. Well, having gone through several different chairs, Heidi and I have done this. I would like to see that at the discretion of the chair, because what we do is we take a temperature of the board. And there was a time when the recognition of everybody was you took your turn. So you were called on, you had your turn. You started at one end, you started at the other end. We had a situation where we had a raise of hands. We had, I can go on and on about the different personality aspects.
Passing the pencil, Jenny, passing the pencil.
Of what we've had. And, but we need some guidelines because, it's not a willy-nilly thing. And so I think, addressing the chair and recognizing the chair, I think that's important. The chair recognizing people and vice versa. So I think that should be a guideline in number 3. Number 2. Also. Over.
So Jenny, does this suggested language not cover that?
The suggested language does, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then leaving number 3 also lets the members know how they participate under the
Right.
guidance of the chair.
Right.
Seeking clarity. So you would need to state in number 2, the chair may determine the rules of order or the style or order in which members may be recognized. But the chair would need to follow these other statements. I guess I have a problem, and I would ask a legal opinion. that if the chair just decided to, I'm going to run the meetings the way we want and disregard 1, 2, and 3, how do we resolve that? From a legal point of view, that's a question for Attorney Hicken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think where my concern is coming from is the inconsistency that you referred to before with the rest of the document. This term, the chair may determine the rules of order, is inconsistent with the document as a whole, which the purpose of which is to determine the rules of order. And so I'm wondering if some more specific language might be more appropriate. I'm trying to read the intention here, and I hope I got it accurate, but here's some alternate proposed language. The chair may determine the style and order in which members may be recognized, or members.
Yes.
Recognized.
Rules of order might be the wrong word.
So I'm going to take the rules of order out of your proposed language and instead use this phrase.
Okay. I maybe just have too much legal background, but so how would we define style and order? So the the chair could always say, well, I'm always going to have these people speak first and these people speak last.
I think the chair could under the.
And then I would like to understand better what the words style and order mean in the context of the document. Commissioner
I
Duca?
came up with the word style to indicate that some people have a more formal style and some people have a less formal style.
Okay.
Maybe there's a better word for that.
Commissioner Duker?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a better word than style, but I'll just go through 8 years. So the first year I started, the style of the meetings was everybody talked at the same time. Then the next style was raise your hand, and that meant that the individual sitting directly to the left and right of the chair stuck their fingers in the chair's face. And then the next style was round table, and round table was you spoke when you were called on. And then since then, it has been some version of that and has varied a little bit, which is fine. And it has become more relaxed as the board has become more respectful. And so, we still give guidelines to new members so they can understand from this document in general how a meeting is conducted. I think number 3 covers that they need to be recognized by the chair and they can't just continually interrupt, which has been the hardest part. But, maybe style is a different word, but the style of the commissioner has changed with every single chair.
Just one other thought, and then I'll call on Administrator Yorkie. And please forgive me if I sound defensive. During the pandemic, there's been some real big changes, and it's how a chair runs a meeting sometimes has to be adapted to the situation at the time. And so I think whatever our language is, it should be appropriate to having this situation, because this may go on for a while. And so whenever we adopt some new language, hopefully it'll fit into the context of virtual meetings or telephone meetings. And so I would ask that to be considered by Attorney Hicken, any language that you draft. Administrator Yorkie, call on you next.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to Commissioner Dukirk for the context that you provided in terms of how things have changed over time. And I think it's an illustration of why having bylaws is important. And I don't think that these rules as drafted preclude various chairs from having different styles of running meetings. I think they're intended to provide some basic structure for how meetings are conducted. You may have a chair come in who is much more formal or less formal than the last chair. And I think these rules provide the latitude for that increase or decrease in formality. But again, it provides an underlying structure for how discussions occur in meetings. And so again, going back to the idea of a common operating picture, I think, you know, the rules as drafted provide that structure. And in terms of style, I mean, I think that is up to the discretion of the chair. And I think these do not preclude chairs from kind of adopting their own style of running meetings.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Sorry, I saw Commissioner Dukirk's hand up first. Then we'll go to you, Commissioner Mills.
Okay, so in trying to stick to that and not make it too confusing, what if number 2 says, any commissioner desiring to speak shall address the chair? And Dave, I'm waiting while Molly changes this, just so you know why there's a pause. Leave everything else out. 3 moves up to be combined with 2. So it just says, any commissioner desiring to speak shall address the chair. A member once recognized shall not be interrupted when speaking unless it is to call a member to order. No member shall interrupt.
I don't want to lose this language in case there's not.
Yep. Right.
Okay. Any commissioner desiring to speak shall address the chair, period.
Yep.
A member once recognized shall not be interrupted when speaking. Did you have additional changes?
Unless it is to call that member to order, no member shall interrupt another in discussion without their consent. I'd like to see the last line removed, but at this point it can stay. This is just a lot less of a scolding statement, but leaves order in there.
Thoughts?
Any other comments on this? Okay, so
Mr. Chair.
yes, Mills.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Dukirk, for the historical, it wasn't that long ago, but the historical context of the different formats. And thank you, Administrator Yorkie, for just kind of explaining how it does not, the rules kind of as written, as had been sent out to us, does not preclude any particular styles. Both of those things, I mean, I guess my question would be then, my impression, Commissioner Dukirk, is that the most recent format has been well, what format has been, do you feel, what format has been the most workable? My impression is that this format is very workable, but I think the concern is that for some people it is not. And so I guess I would just like to hear, based on the historical context, I feel like the original language was great. I don't have a problem with the suggestions that were just made. But I'd like to know more directly what your preference is, format or style-wise.
Okay, Commissioner Dukirk.
The most disruptive was the just everyone talking or the hand raising. What I found was commissioners who had a great deal of input or important things to say just didn't participate at all. Because the stronger members or the ones with the longer arms or the bigger hands were the ones that were speaking up. So in listening to our administrator suggestions and our county attorney suggestions, I'm comfortable with leaving 2 as I suggested, because it just reminds new commissioners that they're addressing the chair, not each other, that they need to be recognized and that they don't interrupt.
Okay, Commissioner Starley?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree there with you, Commissioner Dukirk. When one wants to run as a board chair, I think perhaps a little background would be required of them to understand what it means to be a chair, and perhaps the administrator could help in that area. We are going to have the potential of a couple new board members. So we're going to be, bringing new people on board. And I think for maybe all of our sakes, the chairman should set the precedent in the beginning and help the rest of the board understand this is my style. This is the way we have these guidelines in our procedures, and understand the implications of being a chair. And that can probably come from some education and obviously from experience. So a lot does fall on the shoulders of the chairman if they're brand new. And if not, then they can proceed and, do what they feel is most comfortable for the best results from the members.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Mr.
Okay,
Chair,
so yes, Commissioner Mills.
I always wait to respond until just you're going to say something else, just so you know.
Okay.
Not intentionally. No. I guess my question to Commissioner Dukirk the answer wasn't clear. I heard which ones didn't work, but what does work the best in the past experience. And Commissioner Storley, I greatly appreciate your perspective there too. Over.
Okay. So with the discussion that's going on, we have before us now 3 statements. And previously we had 6 statements. And the intent of the 6 statements was developed by Attorney Hicken. And I guess the question I have is a procedural one going forward. Would it be possible, and this is only a question, or maybe agreeable from the other commissioners, for October 27th, prior to that meeting, that we have both of these recommendations before us so that we feel that they're consistent? Or is it possible, Attorney Hicken, to have that presented to us now, where we would have the original 6 and we can compare them to the statements of these 3? And I'm not objecting to the 3, but I think I need some clarity on, does it communicate the same thing that we had in those 6? And I guess I would want Attorney Hicken's and comments on that as a commissioner as well as our administrator. So with that, Commissioner Dukirk, did you have a question? Or Attorney Hicken, could you respond first and then we can go to Commissioner Dukirk?
Yes, just for clarification, Mr. Chair, is your request that you see a side-by-side view of the 2? Okay. You could also, I'm going to try to do that using screen sharing, but you could also refer to the PDF document,
Right.
Page 12, and put it side by side. But I'll work on that right now as Commissioner Dukirk is commenting.
Okay, Commissioner Dukirk.
So I was just going to tell you that you have the original in your packet if you'd like to compare it.
And I did look at it. Yes, thank you.
And Commissioner Mills quite a while ago asked me a question, and this is where my whole point of concerns is when we do things this way. In my personal opinion, no offense, this is not directed at you, Myron, or the way you run meetings, but having it set up this way where you don't speak unless you're told you can, that means Commissioner Mills will never get his questions answered.
Okay, so Commissioner Mills, did you get your questions answered?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No. I was, I was hoping Commissioner Dukirk and Commissioner Storley could, using that historical perspective, give their opinions on what systems had worked best for them in the past. Thank you. Over.
Okay, comments from Commissioner Storley or Commissioner Mills? Or Commissioner Dukirk from Commissioner Mills? Commissioner Dukirk?
So I'm incredibly biased, and I believe that having the roundtable discussion and allowing commissioners to have conversations about subjects during a meeting is effective. I think that it gives more understanding when Dave and I, or Bobby and I have gone, even Ginny and I, if there's a subject on and we've been able to talk it through with each other, everybody else also gets understanding during it. I know that there are situations where that could get out of control and everybody could start talking at the same time. And then it's just up to the chair to call it back around. And Ginny was incredibly wonderful at that. And she knows I called her the grandmotherly tap, because we had a commissioner that would go round and round, and she would say, now, we've heard what you're saying, and let's, bring it together. And she was really good at that. And that's where style and format for each one is different. But I just think having the roundtable discussion, so those that aren't comfortable raising their hand or speaking up or interrupting can talk, but also allowing discussion between commissioners. And I feel like the way this is written, 1 through 6, does not allow for commissioners to have any discussion.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Storley, I don't see her with us. I don't know if she got disconnected.
Mr. Chair.
This Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Dukirk. That helps me quite a lot. And please correct me if my interpretation is off, but the way things were written and given out in the packet didn't necessarily allow for roundtable. And what I'm hearing you say is there's a lot of value in that roundtable format, though it can get out of hand, in which case the chair needs to rein it in. And so how I see that as the packets version's default is a little bit more orderly. And if we can somehow open that up to allow for the roundtable format, that might give the chair or the discussion or the board's flexibility to have those more natural conversations. And it might be easier to move into that roundtable if the default is the more procedural engagement versus having the default be the roundtable and then trying to rein it in. That seems more problematic to me. But in the very least, I think we should somehow address the roundtable format, even if it's just saying that, at the end of number 2, the chair may decide to open discussions up for roundtable or whatever.
Okay.
Over.
Just Administrator Yorkie, I'll call on you, and then I have a question for Commissioner Mills, if you don't address it.
So I completely appreciate the point that Commissioner Dukirk is making in terms of having sort of unfettered discussion about something. It can lead to some, enlightenment and exchange of ideas that can really further the discussion in a way that a more structured approach to discussion perhaps cannot. I guess the trade-off you're making here is that, Robert's Rules of Order is intended to ensure that all the voices at the table are heard. And in a situation where you do have multiple people talking at once and where there's exchange without a chairman or a facilitator somehow moderating that discussion, it can lead to voices not being heard. And so, that's the trade-off you're making in trying to bring a little more structure to how these conversations happen in board meetings. And I just think, for the sake of all concerned, and to make sure that everyone is heard, having that structure is really important. In terms of providing for some back and forth between commissioners, I totally agree, that's important. You can still have that with a chair moderating the discussion and calling on people. It's not as organic as simply being in a room with other people and just talking at will, but it still affords an opportunity for that kind of exchange. And so I just wanted to say I've been, and I know we all have been in a lot of public meetings, and in almost all cases, I mean, Robert's rules of order are followed, and it does lead to just more effective communication where we don't have people talking over each other. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Commissioner Dukirk?
So it sounds to me like we're all in agreement. We all want these meetings to be respectful. And that's kind of what I've been getting at. When I read the original, any commissioner desiring to speak shall address the chair and not proceed until being recognized does not lead to discussion. So I don't know if the way that I'm trying to explain this to you isn't being understood. And my conversation with Commissioner Mills, there was some clarity and understanding. And even when he tried explaining it, I was listening to him going, okay, he understands what I'm saying, and maybe he'll say it better than I have. But obviously through this discussion, once again, it's not being understood. I feel like we're all saying the same thing, but we're all interpreting the language differently. I just think that some of this, we haven't adopted Robert's rules, and Robert's rules are a good thing. And maybe we do a Robert's rules review at the beginning of every meeting to talk about how meetings are conducted. But this whole, just the way I read 2 and 3, it was originally written is you don't get to speak. I'm going to say it again. It's like being in kindergarten. You can sit there. If you have to go to the bathroom, you're just going to have to cross your legs and sit there and hold it until the teacher decides to call on you. That's what the original language feels like to me. It feels like we've got a teacher and students, and I don't know, it's kind of Hitler-like to me.
Okay, I guess one of the things we could do, and I'll open this for discussion as well to try to move this forward, is could we have, thank you for putting both up on our screen, and I would ask that each commissioner maybe reflect on these 2 different statements. So my question is, Commissioner Dukirk, I think the one on our left, does this meet your concerns, and this is what you would like to see us adopt? Is that language acceptable to you? Does it do what your concerns are? And that's okay with you?
I'd like to see 2 go away, but I'm willing to, meet y'all halfway and say that people still need to be reminded of Robert's rules and how we conduct business, and that, we address each other through the chair. So I'm willing to accept 1, 2, and 3. Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
So I guess then let's try to take care of this right now. Attorney Hicken, you have your hand up. Thank you. Go ahead, and then I'll try to move this forward.
Thank you. I don't mean to hold things up. I added a sentence at the end after Commissioner Mills' comments, and I don't think he can see my screen. A sentence at the end of paragraph 2. So after to obtain such consent, they shall first address the chair, period. I added a proposed sentence that says, at the chair's discretion, discussion of a motion may be by round table style. I'm wishing to get feedback from commissioners, including Commissioner Mills, on that addition.
And before we do that, could I just ask for a better definition of round table? Does that mean that you just take turns or that you just have open dialogue? To me, open dialogue is different than round table. Round table just means you go around the table and you talk. But open dialogue to me is where you just talk back and forth and you don't have any order at all. Could that be clarified before we have that language?
I'm not sure how commissioners wish to define roundtable. I don't know what you mean by saying roundtable, whether it's open discussion or people speak in the order in which they're sitting.
I guess anyone want to
Mr.
clarify
Chair?
that? Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, I was confused about that too. Yeah, to me, roundtable does mean you go chair by chair or seat by seat, person by person, and say something or respond or not or pass. So I think open I mean, hey, why not say at the chair's discretion? Discussions could be open dialogue or roundtable or another style, or I don't know. Is that getting too vague?
Nope, I like that. I like how Molly had it written, round table or open dialogue.
Yeah.
I would also add roll call in certain situations with the pandemic, or an
Yep.
alternate style. But I think sometimes, especially when we were doing basically phone ones, we had to go by roll call. That's the only way we could have discussion.
I agree.
So this should be adaptable, I think, too. The pandemic may be around for a while, and I really think it should fit this, our circumstances going forward. Okay,
Mr.
so
Chair?
yes, Commissioner Mills.
I apologize for not being able to see. Could Commissioner Dukirk's suggested versions be read to me with the changes?
Sure, I could read it. At the chair's discretion, discussion of a motion may be roundtable, and that's in quotation marks, open dialogue, or an alternate style. I would like to suggest roll call as well.
I think
Is it-
alternate covers it.
Alternate, yeah, it could be, an alternate could be at the board's discretion. Discussion on a motion may be determined by the chair. Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
My understanding is that amendment was just onto the original document, and I have that original document. What I don't have is the other version that's just 3 items.
What I would suggest then, Attorney Hicken, maybe I'll call on you, but I'll just make this comment. Maybe what we should do because of the situation with Commissioner Mills, is that we have both of these presented to us for the next meeting. And that way we can look at them, ponder them, think more about them, and then try to resolve that issue when we get into the October 27th meeting. Attorney Hicken, would you like to comment on that, I guess, as well as you were going to make a statement, I believe.
I was just going to suggest that I can email in violation of our new bylaws, I'm going to electronically communicate with Commissioner Mills and email him the 3 new paragraphs if he does have access to email right now.
I already violated the bylaws and sent him a picture of the screen.
Thank you, and hopefully, I have not received a picture yet. Hopefully I will be able to get an email, but that does bring up a really good point about those bylaws, and are those restrictions, are they valuable? Are they, clearly they can be useful, as in this situation, and to Mr. Oh, I just got the picture, I think. Yep. But to Commissioner Bersheim's point that the pandemic could go on for a while, it may be these tools are useful going forward in a meeting.
So Commissioner Mills, you mean the 6 items as presented initially? Or are you talking about the revisions?
Well, I think Attorney Hicken was just kind of joking, and Commissioner Dukirk, that there was violations of our bylaws by sending me electronic documents during a meeting. And my question is, well, we don't want there to be violations, so should we talk about that? I mean, it's a very important tool to be able to communicate with each other during a meeting. It's just that they're, now public data is all.
Okay, I'll go to Commissioner Dukirk and then to Attorney Hicken for a response.
So as someone who's often violated during a meeting by electronic means, I like to leave the language as it is. And this all goes back to training, Dave. This is somewhere where once we get in the swing of things, the administrator would know that you're attending by phone rather than visual, and the administrator would be the person who would be sending you the updates. Or at the beginning of the meeting, we all say, as these changes are made, the county attorney will send the document to whichever commissioner is not able to see it visually.
Okay, Attorney Hicken.
I don't think my joke was, I don't think it was accurate in its premise, because I don't think, so what the sentence reads thus is, it is important for commissioners to refrain from electronic or other forms of communication during meetings. Commissioners are, it's not even a prohibition. What it says is it's important to refrain.
Right.
So in the way that Commissioner Dukirk has helpfully redrafted this, it is, it's permissive of these kind of things. The electronic communication that we're having and sending you this drafted language is part of our discussion. It's not an aside. And it's also ideally sent by me or the county administrator and not by another commissioner. So I'm an attorney and I can argue my way out of anything, I guess.
Whoever hires you, huh? Okay.
I think she covered that well. I think she covered that it wasn't actually violating the new or old rules and that it was necessary to the discussion. I think it covered it well.
Okay,
So
I think I'll just pose the question. Could we just sort of try to reach some consensus on the language on our left as presented? And Commissioner Mills, are you comfortable with your picture as that information? And we could say our preference would be for the original 6, and then indicating, some kind of consensus, not to make a decision. Are you comfortable with that? Is anyone not comfortable with that? Just to get some feedback so that we can, the other option is to present both of them, as I suggested earlier, for our, concern to make a decision at the October 27th meeting, or do you want to try to reach some consensus on this now? Anyone object to not trying to reach some consensus on these two as far as bringing them forward for October 27th. Okay. So I'll just go by a roll call for your preference as language on the left, as we've been amending and changing, or the language that was presented originally with the 6 items. What would your preference be bringing forward, Commissioner Storley?
I would say language on the left.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to be clear, the language quote on the left is the 3 items versus the 6.
Right, correct.
I believe I prefer the language on the left, and would just ask that Attorney Hicken review to see if there's anything we missed in compiling the other over.
Okay. And I will support that. So we'll bring that forward. Thanks for all the good discussion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
I just want to ensure that Commissioner Dukirk could express any further concerns with the language on the left, if there are any.
Sure. Okay, Commissioner DeKirk.
I have no concerns, and I just want to give a heartfelt thank you to Commissioner Mills for taking the time to reach out and talk to me and go through this. And I would also like to thank our new administrator for also working through with this. And then County Attorney Hicken for pushing this forward. I did kind of place a funny bet on you in the beginning of the year and said we wouldn't get it done since we've been working on it for 4 years. So thank you to you for tolerating all of us and this language. Thank you to our chair for continuing to put this on the committee whole meeting and for reminding us several times during this meeting that we are going to approve this on October 27th. And thank you to Commissioner Storley for helping me remind the new commissioners of the old history of trauma that we survived.
We did.
And now we will call MCIT for our 6 sessions of therapy.
Thank you, Commissioner DeKirk. Okay, we will go. I guess we've been going for quite a while. Would we like to have a brief break for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll take a look at the rest of the information. Is that agreeable to everyone? Let's do 8 minutes, 7.5 minutes. Let's reconvene at 11. Let's just reconvene at 12 o'clock. Okay.
Okay.
Get the damn marine stuff.
Okay, let's see if we got everyone.
Commissioner Mills is here. Over.
Okay, thank you. We'll get back to our committee of the whole work session. I think we've covered everything well and had a lot of great dialogue, and hopefully we've got some good consensus going. Do we need to talk more about that 5C added on best practices for phone and video participation? Do we need any more discussion on that? Go ahead,
Mr. Chair.
Attorney Hickman.
I did have a plan to address that 5C remote participation in meetings. And I believe you also wanted to give an opportunity if anyone had any other sections that
Okay, thank you.
you discussed.
So was there any other concerns that want to be addressed till we get to this next, are we okay to go on? Are commissioners comfortable moving on to this part of the discussion? Okay,
I'm good.
Mr. Chair?
yes, Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, I'm comfortable moving on to this part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you. All right, Attorney Hickman, go ahead.
Okay. I suppose just numerically, we should start with section 5C,
Right,
the remote participation in meetings. This is something I added over the last few weeks. I was considering that we're probably going to be in this format for quite a few months, and perhaps we want to put down some procedures and policies, best practices for this type of a meeting format. And the new language is also intended to just make clear that you can't do ITV meetings for any reason. It has to be under the statute pursuant to a pandemic, an emergency, or under very specific conditions, including that if it is not a pandemic or an emergency, the location from which a commissioner is participating has to be a public place. So obviously currently we don't have that condition required because of the pandemic. So, and also just to acknowledge that meeting procedures in general post-pandemic, it's my estimate that they're going to loosen up and there will be far more meetings held by technology than in person in general, just because we've become comfortable with the format and bodies have acquired the technology. So that's my purpose in putting this language in here.
Okay.
I have 2 paragraphs under 5C. And I'll also say this last bullet point, I have made additional changes to the language since you got it in your board packet. Not a lot, but there was one specific area to address, and that the changes are highlighted in the subsequent slides. I'm gonna separately email them to Commissioner Mills also. So this is paragraph 1, which is unchanged from the board packet version. This is the general allowance kind of paragraph that says, as allowed by open meeting law, commissioners may and others may participate from a remote location. I don't know why this is here. I can't move it. There we go. And it just does have that direction that those participating from a remote location should mute their connection when not speaking in order to reduce extra noise or feedback during the meeting. That direction is intended we're speaking not to just to commissioners there, but we're speaking to observers of the meeting. Because I know we've had problems before with echoing. Just trying to multitask here and send the language to Commissioner Mills. So in this next slide, I'm showing you paragraph 2 of 5C. This is the paragraph that does have some changes from the board packet version. And those changes are highlighted. Commissioner Mills, I'm sending you these now. This is the first 2 bullet points. There are also 2 other bullet points. The first bullet point makes clear that we need to make that record at the beginning of the meeting as to why we're doing a meeting by interactive television or video conferencing. Paragraph 2 says county technical support should make sure that the board members have at least the minimum technology required for making video appearance during meetings. This language I drafted straight out of my head without any kind of a model, so I am absolutely open to different suggestions. The third and fourth bullet points are as they were in the board packet, with the exception of one changed word in the second bullet point on this slide. So I'll go back to the previous slide. Any questions or concerns with this language?
Okay, raise your hand, or Commissioner Mills indicate your desire.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Attorney Hicken. I did get the email and can review it live here. For the second bullet point, is that something that should be in the bylaws, or is that just in like an operational good idea?
So,
and it gets tricky because, for example, in my location, well, there's just situations where things could be different, or more challenging, or potentially not plausible, or what's the word? Just not realistic, I guess. Over.
Commissioner, Attorney Hicken.
thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Mills. I think it's a good question as to whether this paragraph belongs in the rules of procedure. I can tell you one reason I put it in there is because I want to make it apparent that it shouldn't be the obligation of the commissioner to provide their own laptop. What I was not considering is what you just brought up, which is that not everybody's home can easily be equipped for broadband, or if it can be equipped, it would be at great expense to the county. So we could modify this language. We could also leave it out. It's really your decision, the commissioner's decision. Maybe we want some input from Rena Rogers on that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I was just asking. I don't think that we should necessarily take it out, but maybe just insert like when feasible. County technical support should provide each member of the board, and maybe that's too loose, but yeah, I can just, there are situations.
So, Mr. Chair, so I think we have provided some support for commissioners that needed to understand how to use Zoom or some of these other technologies. I would be reticent to say, or hesitant to say, that we would have IT staff going to people's homes and setting up antennas or doing other things. So it's, I guess it depends what you mean, the minimum technology required. We've provided laptops, we've provided instruction on how to use them, we've added applications. That's minimum support, I think. Similar support that we do for other county employees. I don't know how much you need to clarify that.
I think my understanding would be that minimum, it's consistent with staff. And Commissioner Mills, if you're
Oh, can they hear?
comfortable with this language, I think we leave it as is unless there's some other suggestions. But minimum to me means,
Oh, because you turned your sound off.
We can hear you.
I didn't have my sound on at all.
we can hear you both.
So it's being picked up off of yours. If you muted, then they didn't hear it.
We heard you. Again,
Are we comfortable with that language? If not, then please let us know at this time.
Are you turned on? Okay.
Okay, very good.
So we're playing back and forth here with who's got sound on and mute. Did you guys hear what I said?
Yes.
Okay. Because you were picking it up off of James's computer because mine was muted and the sound was turned down. So
We heard it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we decided to leave minimum in and the statement in.
Okay.
Okay. Very good.
All right. I'm going to turn my
Anything else on this before we go on? As far as remote
Mr. Chair?
meetings, yes, Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, and I just thought we should talk about the video side of things as well. It might largely be because of just my living situation, but I've been finding just phone-in audio meetings a lot easier to participate in, and a lot of that has to do with whoever is chairing the meeting and how they do things. But it also just the connection, I feel like, is much clearer and easier. There's not I don't know if anyone else has been experiencing this, but oftentimes, and when I say often, I think I mean almost every video meeting I'm in, there is some kind of lag or glitch or really, a big slowdown and then a speeding up of speech or a dropped connection, that sort of thing. And I have not had that whatsoever with just these straight up phone calls. And so I recognize the value of seeing people and their faces and expressions and how important that is for communication. But then there's just the practical side of the connection, and those types of glitches and whatnot can be difficult to really figure out, whether it's the Zoom server or if it's somebody's home connection or if it's their device or what it is. So I guess I just thought it'd be worth talking about as a board regarding the video side of things and how that is preferred.
Okay.
Over.
I would just like to maybe address that, Commissioner Mills, by suggesting that maybe it would be better to just insert the words as preferred over audio only connection when practical. Would that be a little bit better understood? Because you're saying it's not practical, or maybe it's not even possible, but I think sometimes, so I guess, would that help, or do you think we should strike something about preferred?
Well, I don't want it to be about me. And so I guess I was asking other commissioners and staff if they've also had glitches that make meetings difficult. And if so, do we want to have the preferred method be video, or if that's just a method.
Commissioner Storley?
Thank you. Well, Dave, I appreciate your situation there. My broadband here is excellent. I don't have any glitches with Zoom. I've done webinars and all that. But I think, we should have it both. Those that want to have, or that can have the Zoom and video, and your situation or future situations, we do have to think about the future here of phone in. So I'm fine with both languages.
Any other discussion on that? Would it be better to have, when practical, added Commissioner Dukert?
My only thing is the video at all times. I don't know if that, I see why it should be in there, but I don't know. I shut my video off when I'm eating, but y'all get to watch me eat when we're there in person. So I guess I can eat on Zoom. It's a little more up close. And then when we do the Pledge of Allegiance, I shut off the video because I don't need the whole world to stare at my belly button.
So you're suggesting that we strike that language? Video themselves at all times?
Right.
Yeah, because Commissioner Storley, some meetings you don't have video and you're not calling in by phone. And I'm not sure, what the preference is, but I don't know. Do we have to be seen?
I think it's our choice.
Attorney Hicken?
I'll just, I'm not married to any of this language, but I want to explain to you the purpose of putting it in there, my intention in putting it in there. When meetings are in person, members of the public can see that their commissioner is present, and if not involved in the discussion, is at least there and has access to the discussion and can hear it. When video is turned off, not in Commissioner Mills's situation where somebody is calling in, but when somebody is actually on a computer connecting through Zoom video but has turned off their camera, your constituents can't see whether you're there, whether you're actually participating in the meeting, whether you're the discussion, all of that. And so my intention in putting this rule in there is to cover that concern. We want this to be as close as it can be to an in-person meeting, as far as at least to the boundaries of what technology allows.
Okay, Commissioner Dukert, you had your hand up.
Commissioner Mills can put his phone on mute and set it down. We really have no way of knowing if he's there or not, except for that he waits for Myron to talk and then interrupts him.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Mills?
Well, yeah, I appreciate Attorney Hickens' reasons, and I certainly want the people in District 3 to know, and throughout the county to know that I'm working and participating, and I think it's worth pointing out that commissioners, my understanding is commissioners could just not show up at all, even if it was in person, and they can't be booted off the board. And sure, people would know that, but so it seems like a different set of well, I don't know where my thought process is going here, but it just seems I guess I see the value in the video. I just don't know that we need to spell it out in our bylaws at this time, and this stuff is of course under the pandemic or emergency section, so it could very well be limited, but as Attorney Hicken said before, the open meeting laws are changing as we become more familiar with technology. So I just thought it was worth talking about, and to Commissioner Storley's point about the video being on or off as a choice, you know, I respect that too. I like to see people when I am in the video, but if, for instance, a commissioner is calling in versus if a commissioner is joined via video with just video off, you know, that the effect is very similar. So it almost seems discriminatory there. So I don't really know. I'm just thinking out loud here about all that. Over.
So Commissioner Mills, are you saying that we should eliminate this section? Or should we leave it as is and presented?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really don't know. I'm processing it and just I thought it was worth talking about and getting everyone's input there. I don't have a strong preference at this point. I guess if I were to make a suggestion on this, I would just try to leave strong language out and just I guess I would be more comfortable with language like preferred or encouraged instead of at all times. That seems that would be an example of strong language.
Okay.
Yep.
So Attorney Hicken, could you do that for our meeting on October 27th?
Sure. And I apologize that that's the way my language comes out. It comes from writing contracts.
No, it's
wanting
not.
to-
I don't. Thank you. It's not bad. I'm just, I think, well, whatever. I did have a question about again, strong language on that fourth bullet. Must not use the chat function.
Yep.
Should that be should? What's that?
I can explain why.
Yes, please. Okay, over.
And maybe it's not necessary. I bet Rena Rogers could answer this, but the reason I changed it, so I think originally as I had drafted it in your board packet, it's should or something like that. I changed it to must with a fear that we would get into the problem of destruction of public records. Because if you're in Zoom and you go into your chat function and you begin a chat, you're creating data, government data. And if that's public data, we do have an obligation. Public data created during a commissioner meeting, nonetheless, we have an obligation to retain it for a period of time. And I don't know, I'm not aware of the technology and whether that's automatically retained or whether it just goes away. I also don't know, for purposes of transparency, if the chat shows up for somebody on YouTube.
Okay, Commissioner Dukirk, you had your hand up?
I think must should stay in there because what's to prevent 3 commissioners from making a decision on the sidelines?
Right.
It's kind of like talking during meetings. We should look at the chat button as talking during meetings, which we've all agreed we don't like that.
I think I would agree with Commissioner Dukirk that yes, we would run into some real issues with open meeting law if we did not have must. Okay. So going forward to October 27th, Attorney Hicken, you could modify some of this language to be more permissive. And I think we can then move on. Unless there's any more questions on this. Okay, then we'll go on to Code of Ethics. As it was explained that this has been added for us to consider as something that we could adopt. And so let's open that up for discussion. It's on our screen. And Attorney Hicken, if you have any comments, please make them at this time, and then we'll see if we can decide whether to move with this forward or to not go with it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Mills.
could you please guide me onto the page number?
That would be, I just had it,
Page 38.
23 on mine, but I think it may be in the packet 38.
Yeah.
Thank you. I found it.
It's page 23 of operating rules and guidelines.
Thank you.
Okay, Attorney Hicken, any comments about this?
Yeah, I'll just say that from county to county, there's a difference whether a code of ethics actually appears in the rules of procedure bylaws or not. So since I was being inclusive with this draft, giving the commissioners an opportunity to delete what they didn't see relevant, I did include the code of ethics. I modified it to make it more general, and as I informed my modifications by use of a publication from AMC and from NACO, which I think are both attached to the board packet. I would say it is your choice, commissioners, whether to include a code of ethics in the bylaws or not. And I might suggest that the code of ethics be addressed again sometime in the future, just more thoroughly processed by the commissioners, so you have opportunity to discuss what you think should be in it, kind of customize it more to Cook County if you think that would be appropriate. But this is meant to be a kind of a simplified version of the code of ethics that includes the bare bones. I intended to make it non-controversial to, hopefully I don't always do well at that, but so this is the intro paragraph, and then there are 5 other paragraphs. Commissioner Mills, I haven't made any changes in these slides from the board packet version.
Okay, for discussion purposes, on this one, we'll do just a roll call for your comments. Should we include it? Are there issues with it? Or anything else that you have concerns about, or do you support it? So I'll just start with Commissioner Dukirk. Any comments on Code of Ethics?
I absolutely love it.
Okay,
Maybe 3 could be in big bold letters.
okay, 3. Yeah, very important. Okay, Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support it. I do not have any concerns.
Thank you. Commissioner Storley?
Yes, definitely. I support it. Let's, I haven't studied it in depth yet, but I think it's something to look at, and definitely have a good code of ethics with us too.
Yes, I definitely support it, and I think it's got some good statements in there, and it's a great summary of the information that I think that was provided additionally to our packet about Code of Ethics and so forth. So I really like the statement. It's a good summary, and I think we should include it when we move forward on October 27th. So let's do that. Then we'll go to citizens. This is also a new section. We have public communications under that, open meeting law, and quite a bit of information. So I'll turn it over to Attorney Hicken for any comments that you may have on this section, and maybe address why we should have it and pros and cons of it as you see it.
So it's been a long time since I worked on this section, honestly. We had done it in our initial review, I think with Rena Rogers and Brady Powers. We had attacked this section early on, but it hadn't been presented to the board yet. But I think the general purpose of the citizen section to inform people who would like to interact with the board how to do so. and inform people who have questions for the county how their questions might be addressed. So we went through the various modes of public communication that the county has. And these are not specific to county board communication with citizens. It's more broad. Just quickly addressing open meeting law because it does, it is related to how the public interacts with the board. Audience participation at board meetings. I'm having a hard time with my memory and where these bullet points came from, other than I think they might have come from the previous versions of the guidelines that are read aloud at the beginning of public comment back in the old days. And again, I was inclusive in these, so if they seem like they are too onerous, I'm open to changing the language. And then finally, in section D, we talk about how the citizens can expect to hear back from their inquiries and complaints. I don't have slides about this, this section.
Okay, so, but I think we all received that information and there's no modifications or changes. So, again, go by roll call. I guess the question is, should we include this in our, bylaws, policies and procedures? Are there concerns about any of it? And I guess those would be the two main issues. Should we include it? And then if we do, would we want some changes into it? So we'll do a roll call on that one. We'll start with Commissioner Storley.
Thank you. Well, in looking it over, I think as we need guidelines, I think the public does too. And so this would be something to back us up, in terms of having folks come before our board meetings with their 5 minutes, expecting, dialogue with us, which we don't, but expecting that they would have an answer in the future, whether it be a phone call or email or whatever, but that they would know that we would respond to them after our meetings. So I think it's good for them to have guidelines also, especially to refrain from the following on their part.
Okay. Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering, well, first, I guess, looking from the refrain from the following section, could we talk a little bit about the comments that are unduly repetitious? I feel like when there's a hot topic coming up, there's usually a good number of people in the room wishing to speak, and a lot of times there's some repetition, and I think that's good. So I don't know about that particular line, what determines if it's unduly repetitious or not. I think everyone has the right to, and some people recognize that they don't have any more to add and just would say, I agree with so-and-so and want to voice that opinion. Others want to just go through some of the points that they do agree with, even if they are repeating. So I thought that might be worth talking about. And then the one before that, comments that are not relevant to matters on the agenda or to matters of county business. I think we should probably strike the one that's not relevant to matters on the agenda, because there are often some larger issues that aren't on every agenda, but are kind of in process and kind of on our plates or even back burners that people wish to speak about. And then, so those would just 2 bullets there. But then I was wondering if there was, I didn't see it, and maybe I just missed it. But if there is anywhere that encourages people to be put on the agenda to talk about a topic, because that's, I think, an excellent way to have a little bit more dialogue. If I mean, we can set aside a time, and I believe we've encouraged people in the past to do that if they really want to bring something forward and talk about it. Then if they make that request to be put on the agenda, then we can make time for that. It's just that a lot of times some of the conflicts come up with public comment, because that's not really a time to respond or have a discussion. It's just for people to speak their mind. Over.
Okay. Commissioner DeKirk?
All right, so I vote we remove C and D. This document is a board conduct document, which, yes, we need to know how the public participates, but this is instructions for the public. And they're probably not going to look in our guidelines to see how they're supposed to participate. And a lot of this has changed. And as Molly said, the way we used to do it in the good old days when we gave instructions before the meeting on how to conduct yourself, we have often changed the 5 minutes to 2 minutes, depending on how many people. So having it written down in here may have someone come back to us later and say, I only got 2 minutes. And Molly knows we've had people question this in the past. I mean, there's just a lot of things that could be changed. So I would rather have C and D taken out of this packet completely, and then have us as a group or the next board come up with audience participation of board meetings, something like this, and have it available on the county website so the public knows how to participate, and have it available in written form. And someday when we're back in the courthouse, have it available when people come into the room. There's a line in there that says you need to sign in prior to the meeting. We've only done that during truth and taxation on 1 or 2 occasions, and one other meeting we did that. And then under D, I've heard many times people aren't getting a response. And so I think that is also something that needs to be worked on and decided on, where citizens should correspond, who they should send their information to, and who's going to respond to it. And I think that both of these sections are a big, huge discussion that we're not going to get done today.
Okay. I guess I could comment that I agreed with this language, generally speaking, but I also hear that maybe some people are not comfortable with bringing this forward on October 27th. And I guess I would just like to follow up with that and say, do a little quick roll call, or I'll just ask. I guess, if you disagree with just dropping this now for our October 27th meeting, and more than likely have it addressed sometime in the future, would anyone disagree with doing that right now? It seems like we're putting a lot of time into it. So again, does anyone disagree if we just drop this from our further discussion on October 27th to make a decision?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
I'm not certain that I want to drop it. I do see value for commissioners, for the board, to understand what our agreed upon interactions at meetings with the public should be. I agree with Commissioner Dukirk that most citizens won't be reading our bylaws prior to attending a meeting, and so there needs to be, if this section is intended for citizens, then, or just public, then we need to have something separate and further. And so I just think that it would be helpful to have in there. I'm curious if Commissioner Dukirk is feeling like there's just too much that isn't good in the content for commissioners to want to drop it versus leaving it in there and then developing. Over.
Okay, Commissioner Dukirk, would you like to address this concern there or question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Dave, we could leave C, audience participation in board meetings. And then just maybe leave the first two paragraphs or change them a little. And then at a future meeting, as the chair suggested, create the rules that we would like for us and the public to adhere to. But maybe it just says audience participation at meetings and just let us and the public know that we fully support continuing with citizen comments. I get what you're saying, but from approach on down, there's a lot of things that remain to be desired and need to be changed.
Okay, just for clarity, would you summarize that again? So you're saying would you specifically point out that what would you would like dropped? You said after a certain word, address, their name? No.
Nope. C, audience participation at board meetings.
Right.
It is the intention of these, so leave the rules out. I mean, it can just say it is the intention of the board to support the interest of the general public in following board business during their meetings. Audience citizen comments included with every county board meetings agenda is a public comment portion where the board has designated an opportunity for citizens to appear and speak on any issue topic related to county board business.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Mills.
So I agree that there's work to be done here. I do see value. I mean, I know there's been inconsistencies in past proceedings, but I see value, and I see a lot of value in the first two bullets. And a number of the refrain part. I just had some questions on two of them there, and it just helps. I think as a newish commissioner, it helps set expectations. As if I had these bylaws as a new commissioner, reading through it, I would have a much better understanding of what to expect and how to respond, and what's acceptable for public comment from the public, and where to draw the line and say, no, that's not okay. And so I see a lot of value there, but I do see your point on there's more work that needs to be done.
Commissioner Mills, I 100% agree with you. I think that there's a lot of value in what's in the rest of the document, and that it's important to both the commissioners and the public, but I don't think this document is where it needs to live.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it. Yeah. Okay.
You know, we could have a line in there that says, see audience participation policy.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Chair?
I'll go ahead and comment if you have more comments, Commissioner Mills, and then I'll comment.
Yeah, I was just wondering about part D too, because that in particular, I think, is important for new commissioners and the board to understand.
Okay. I think as far as my comments, I mentioned before that I think this is pretty good work. We maybe can fine tune it a little bit, but I look at this is sort of under policies and procedures and not specifically bylaws, that this is good information for the public as well as our commissioners. And that if we adopt this, this is something that we vetted and I think would be good to have it in some kind of document. I do understand some of the concerns on some of the language. So bringing this forward, Attorney Hicken, could you craft something based upon some of the concerns that you've heard from us and bring this forward again, or would you want more input from us now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see a lot of easy changes to make that make a lot of sense to me based on what Commissioner Mills and Commissioner Dukirk have said. The guidance that I would want to know is whether there is consensus to present a version of this that doesn't have any of those bullet points after audience members are asked to abide with the following guidelines. I'm going to make changes to those bullet points. I'm going to eliminate the sign-in bullet point. I'm going to, there's actually 2 sections where it says confine comments to matters pertaining to the agenda. I'm getting rid of matters pertaining to the agenda and keeping matters of county business.
Good.
I would get rid of comments that are unduly repetitious. That might not be necessary and might just cause confusion. But anyway, that's my question is there consensus to remove all those bullet points? I've only heard Commissioner Dukirk asking to remove all of it.
Okay. Well, let's go through this again to clarify that issue. I'll just do a roll call. Would you like to have the language that now appears, except that we have to read this for Commissioner Mills, or could you send him a document so that he could read what you've done now before us on the screen? And then I'll try to see, get some feedback from the group.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
Could we get some feedback from Administrator Yorkie on thoughts with these particular, I guess both sections C and D, and just if from his perspective that there's a better place for these rules. I'm seeing that there very well could be.
Okay. Administrator Yorkie, could you respond to that?
Yeah, so thank you for the invitation to comment. I do think it's really important, getting back to what I said at the beginning of this discussion about establishing a common operating picture and common expectations about how meetings are going to be run. I think it's important for the board, for staff, and for citizens. And I like the idea of having these expectations laid out in some form. I don't have a lot of heartburn with including them in the bylaws. And I don't know if there is another place where we could post these, but I think it is important, as Commissioner Mills said, when new commissioners come in, to be able to point to something that says, here's how the public has an opportunity to engage with the board during meetings and outside of meetings. I just think being clear about what those expectations are is very important for open government. So I'm open to suggestions about how else we could do this. I don't see it as problematic to leave these in the bylaws.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, going back, I guess anyone else want to comment? And then what I'm going to do is ask for, I'll do a roll call on whether or not we should move forward for October 27th with the language that has been modified and changed as presented. And I know that we have one exception to not having language after a certain point. But I think if we could all just go through this at this time and look at it and see if we could live with this as far as something we can bring forward to October 27th. I will, any more questions or comments before I ask for your roll call input? Commissioner Starley?
Thank you. Yes, basically, I agree with cleaning up some of the language and so forth, but I'm wondering, since we're calling this bylaws, I would rather have this put under policy and procedure rather than being a bylaw. Sounds too strict.
Okay, comment, I think my understanding is that this is not in the bylaws. But yes, it is. No, it isn't. These are additions, and are they policies and procedures, Attorney Hicken? What's your take?
I would call it, whoops. I would call it, you're making it a written policy by including it in this document. It's not a rule of procedure. Well, it is kind of.
Yeah.
But the section it's under is called citizens. There's a separate section, section 5 for rules of procedure, if you think this belongs under that.
And it is headed up by public communication. So can that stand alone?
So Ginny's asking the same thing I'm asking.
Yeah.
And
I don't
along
know.
the lines of what Commissioner Storley said, what the heck is this document? Because the front page calls this Cook County Board of Commissioners operating rules and guidelines.
Right.
And we have it on our agenda as bylaws, and we've also called it policy. So I think there's confusion there. I hate to bring it up at this late in the game, but this document needs to be called the right thing.
Bylaws is shorthand for, just so that I don't have to say the whole title all the time or type it out. Rules of procedure and guidelines, I would call this a guideline. A written guideline is the same, is a part of your written policy. That's the.
See, now you used all three in that sentence. I don't want you to argue like a lawyer. That was terrible, 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 terrible. Is it a guideline and rules? Is it a bylaw, or is it a policy?
It's a guideline, and it's a policy.
Okay,
I would say guideline is a category of policy, if it's written.
Okay.
Commissioner Storley, does that clarify it for you?
Mhm. Yes, I like the word guideline. Thank you.
Okay, so could we format this a little differently, Attorney Hicken, to make it more clear? Or do we just understand it?
How do commissioners suggest it be formatted? Do
Okay.
you want to put it under a different category? Do you want to call this something different?
Mr. Chair.
Let's do a roll call vote on that one. We'll start with you, Commissioner Mills, since you started.
I'd like to include it. I just think that we need to edit it, but I think it would be helpful for new commissioners and for the board for expectations. And as Administrator Yorkie said very eloquently, just to keep everyone on the same page, I also would like to have something separate so that it is maybe more accessible for the public. So it's not buried in, or buried, which do you say? But so it's not buried in our guidelines here. But there are many areas in the document that have suggestions, but also set rules. So I'm comfortable with having it have multiple names. I appreciate the clarification that bylaws is shorthand, because I don't know the difference between all of those things. So, but I think I'd like to keep it with just some editing.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Storley?
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Duker?
Yes, but I don't like that it says 5 minutes in there.
Okay. And I would think that it's best to address it. So Attorney Hicken, could you take some of these concerns? I believe from what I'm hearing is that we would have these added as sections. After 8 committees, it would be a 9, 10, and 11. As far as additions and leave it as is. Commissioner DeKirk?
Who's going to enforce these? Because as a person who has been attacked during a meeting while everyone else sat there and allowed it to happen, if it's in here, who's responsible for enforcing this?
I would assume the board chair.
Me too.
Mr. Chair?
There might be some assistance that would be, coming forth even from the administrator. Let's say we have a very violation with some kind of very serious threat, then I think the administrator could definitely take some emergency action. And whether that's law enforcement or having someone come for, EMS or something.
I think that needs to be noted in here, who's responsible for enforcing this so that the new board members and the public know.
Okay. So Attorney Hicken.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's important to address, absolutely. And I also want to note that whereas the chair is running the meeting, I've witnessed it on a regular occasion that it's nice to have commissioners assist the chair or have reminders or signals. So I think we can all, or the board as a whole, or individuals on the board can certainly notify the chair or potentially a speaker. I guess through the chair is how we're writing these bylaws. But I also agree on striking the 5 minutes. I guess that's a different point, but we should define how. I mean, it's just part of running the meeting, I think.
Right. Okay. So all right. So the 5 minutes, I would agree with maybe striking out 5 minutes and saying limit comments to the discretion of the chair, because if there's 40 people, or sometimes, you could extend the comment period, or if it's a public meeting, I think it gives some good discretion to look at the number of people that want to speak and providing the opportunity for them to do so. And it might be conducive to limiting it to 3 minutes based upon the number of people that want to present their views. Is that okay with everyone? Commissioner Storley?
Yes, definitely. Not put a time frame because like you say, we have numbers that exceed quite a few and we have maybe one. The other thing is, remember, board chairs have a gavel.
Right.
And the gavel can call things to order.
Sure. Good point. Commissioner DeKirk?
Somewhere in there, we have to let the public know that they will all be given equal time. So even though it's not set in stone that it's 5 minutes, I would like for us and the public to know that if the chair says you will all get 3 minutes, they can all have up to 3 minutes. That we're not going to just willy-nilly let one person have 5 and one have 1 and one have 2. And maybe that needs to be in here too, that you don't get to give your minutes to someone else, because we've had that problem also.
Yeah. Okay, so do you have a suggestion for wording on that?
I think so. Hold on, please.
Attorney Hicken, thank you so much for this remarkable ability to edit things as we go. It's quite a skill. It's very appreciated, and it's very facilitative for our decision-making process going forward. Yeah.
I don't know if this is the best language, but this is what I came up with on the spot. limit comments to the time allowed, distributed equally among commenters and determined by the chair. Yeah.
Everyone okay with that? And object if not? Okay. All right, let's look at any other language right now that's of concern in what's been being presented to us. Hopefully, Commissioner Mills, you've been able to keep up with some of these changes.
Yes.
Okay, so is this something we can bring forward on October 27th?
Hey, Pam.
Yes, go ahead. Oh, I thought I heard someone speak. All right, no objections for bringing this forward, October 27th as presented to us with these revisions. Very good. Then we'll go on to the last part is staff, which would be 11. Page 25 of my operating rules and guidelines document. This is our last section.
Yes. Okay, I think these are pretty straightforward, and I did reach out to the staff members. This should say A, not B.
Right, I was wondering. Okay.
So yeah, I think the headings might be screwed up in my PowerPoint, but the text should be identical to what's in your board packet. So I reached out to the county administrator, auditor, treasurer to just get their review of this language and make sure they agreed with the description of their role. I didn't hear back, although maybe Administrator Yorkie has comments to offer at today's meeting. But these are meant to describe not the entire job description of each position, but the parts of their job that involve interaction with the board.
Okay. Administrator Yorkie, a comment?
Yes, I just want to say I'm good with the language as written.
Right, thank you. Any concerns about this? I think that's important that he agrees with it. I've read it and it seems it's very clear to me, and I think it's very important that the public understands this as well as new board members coming on, that this is sort of a good summary. Any concerns about bringing this forward on October 27th? Please state.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, I find B5 particularly interesting. Just in its,
Oh, wait,
in its
wait.
vagueness.
Okay, yeah, I'm asking about county administrator right now.
My apologies. I have no concerns.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll go on to B, county auditor treasurer. Attorney Hicken, would you like to comment on that? It's not on the screen right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the Word document for this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, county auditor treasurer is here. I think that the second sentence of this introductory paragraph is actually incorrect. It says the county auditor or designee shall prepare a written agenda for all regular and special meetings. And I think that's actually under the purview of the county administrator.
Right.
So if there's no objection to this, I'm going to take this sentence and put it up here.
Right. Good.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Commissioner Duker.
Commissioner Mills, myself, and the administrator are all missing the personnel meeting right now.
Okay. Well, let's just try to do this quickly. Thank you for doing that, and see if we can just quickly go through what's left. I think that would be beneficial, but if you have to excuse yourself, I guess quickly, I'll ask the two of you, do you have any serious issues with bringing this forward on October 27th as presented for the county auditor, county attorney, or role of staff?
This is Commissioner Mills. I just have some small edits for the
Okay.
county auditor, and I think Attorney Hicken is working over those, but otherwise, no.
Okay. Commissioner Dukirk?
I do not have any concerns. I think we covered the tough stuff. And sorry to interrupt and tell you that we don't want to be here. That's not it at all, but
No. It's understandable. Thank you. Commissioner Storley, you have any problem with bringing this forward as
Let
presented?
her know.
No,
Okay, then
I emailed April. Let her know.
I think then with that, unless there's any other announcements or things you want to address, then I'll adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everyone. Very productive.
Thank you.
Thank
Lot of
you.
good work. Thank you so much.
thank you.